You are listening to WHCJ 90.3 FM, y'all. I'm Will Sirius, Savannah's best kept secret. As promised, the most important thing that's going to happen on the show today. Former mayor of the city of Savannah, the first African American student at Armstrong Atlantic State University, scholar in residence here at Savannah State University. Dr. Otis Johnson is with me. Welcome to the show, Dr. Johnson. How you
Thank
doing?
you. I'm doing well, and I'm very happy to be on the show today.
Well, I'm certainly glad to have you. I gave a little bit of a preview to the listening audience.
Hmm.
When I first came on, I said we've had the chance to have a couple of conversations this week. Um, this week, SSU commemorated the March on Washington, and amongst other things that I've learned this week, I've learned about your role in the civil rights movement here in Savannah. So we're gonna kind of start there. Let's talk a little bit about your experience growing up here in Savannah.
All right. I was born in Savannah. I went to the public schools here and graduated from the Alfred E. Beach High School in 1960. Uh, During my senior year, 1960, uh, two of my homeroom classmates, Carolyn Quillen and Joan Tyson, were among the first arrested in the sit-ins at the Levy's Azalea Room. There was another young man who was a student out here by the name of Ernest Robinson. Uh, anyway, the first and only time that I was ever suspended from school or gotten to any real disciplinary trouble at school is when we left school to go to the hearing in the court on our two classmates, and I laugh and joke about it and say how naive we were, because if we had just played hooky that day and gone on down to the courtroom, I never would have been suspended. But what we did is we came to school and checked in. And then, without permission, we left school to go to the hearing down at the police court, which was then located on Havisham and Oglethorpe Avenue. When we got back to school, the principal, Otha Douglas, met us at the door and told us that we were suspended and would only be readmitted when we brought a parent to school. My grandparents raised me, and they didn't play about school. So getting in trouble at school for any reason was really frowned upon. But my grandfather, knowing what was going on, came to school with me, and we had to go through the ritual of promising that we wouldn't break the school rules anymore and that we would be good and all that stuff. And so we were readmitted. But that was my introduction to the civil rights movement. Of course, being a reader, I was already informed about what happened in February in Greensboro,
Uh-huh.
North Carolina, with the original sit-ins there at the Woolworth store. Our sit-in started on March the 16th. And March the 16th is significant because it's the day before St. Patrick's Day.
Mm-hmm.
And St. Patrick's Day is a big deal in Savannah.
Right.
So from the beginning, we wanted to make a statement, that we were tired of Jim Crow and that we were going to start challenging it. So that was my introduction. And then I went in the Navy right after high school, but when I got back in 1962, I enrolled at Savannah State College at the time. And I was a music major, music education major, because when I thought about what I wanted to be at that time, I had such a good time in the beach band that I figured, well, I'll become a band director and have a good time and a good career and a great band, just like I played in high school. But then in the spring of 1963, we had an uprising out here called the Student Uprising of 1963.
Mm-hmm.
I have there's a piece in Dr. Clyde Hall's history of Savannah State University, and I'm going to have a chapter in my book devoted to the student uprising, where students went on strike, and then about 65 of us went over to Armstrong to transfer, but I was the only one to follow through, and that's how I got to be the first African American to go to Armstrong.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now there was supposed to be a group of you
Mm-hmm.
going to Armstrong,
Mm-hmm.
a group of 8 or 9, I believe, right?
No, 65.
It was 65 of you.
Yeah,
Okay.
55. I'm sorry, 55.
Okay. So how'd you end up being the one?
Well, the rest of them, for whatever reasons, decided not to turn their applications back in. And I didn't know they were going to turn their applications in. Had I known, I don't know if I would have changed my mind about going through with it or not. But it was a big surprise to me because, we had that group mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And we figured, well, we'd have strength in those numbers. And then I turned around and looked around and wasn't anybody standing but me. That taught me a lesson for life. If you believe in something strong enough, be willing to go with a crowd or go by yourself. So I went on and started the transfer procedure and ended up being admitted and going to class on June 12th, 1963. I'm really happy about those folk who didn't follow through, because they gave me the honor of being the first black to attend, and that really set me on a historic course in this community, which I'm still traveling right now. Had all of them come, then I would have just been a name in the number, in the crowd. So they did me a favor.
and off of what you just said, like that you've taught me that from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
I spent almost the last decade as chief editor over at WSAV, and you did an interview once not too long ago with Joanne American, reporter at WSAV.
Yes.
And you told Joanne, you said, Joanne, if you believe in something, you have to be willing to do it by yourself. And I carried that with me. I edited that soundbite for WSAV that day, and I carried that with me. So that's one thing that you've taught me, whether you knew it or not. The first day of class at Armstrong, you the only African American male, the first African American male. But before we get into the first day of class, to get into the school, you needed a graduate of Armstrong to write you a letter of recommendation. And at that time, only white people had graduated from Armstrong.
That's right.
How did you get that letter of recommendation?
Well, once I found out that I was the only applicant, I went to the NAACP, and W.W. Law was the president of the NAACP, and we sat down and talked about it, and he said, this is a great opportunity to desegregate Armstrong, and you've got to go through with it. And so we got a catalog, and we looked at the admissions criteria. And, man, they had written those admissions criteria so subjectively until they could have turned anybody down. And then I found out that there had been 3 other blacks who had applied and been turned down at Armstrong. So we were determined that we were going to follow it through. We didn't know whether I'd be admitted or not, but we were going to follow it through. So we looked at the details in the admissions policy. So I got a letter saying that they had received my application and they would process my application. But before that, there was a section on the application, if I remember right, that said that you needed the recommendation of an alumnus. Now, as you said, there were no black alumnus. So what we did was to find a liberal white doctor here, Mason Robertson, and we called him. Mr. Law called him and asked him would he be willing to give me a recommendation, and he said yes. And so that was removed as a reason not to let me in. Second hurdle was I got a telephone call that I had to come and take the entrance examinations for freshmen. Well, I had taken the entrance examinations at Savannah State to get in the fall of 1962. I was finishing up my freshman year, and I had taken the freshman English sequence, the history sequence, the biology sequence, all of those things, the math sequence, that all of those things that would be, a part of the entry battery. I had already taken one time to get into Savannah State, and then I've taken the freshman level courses. So I was ready. So I went over and I took those tests, and evidently I didn't score low on any of those tests because they never brought that up again as a reason, why I couldn't be admitted.
Did they ever give you your score?
No. Then, and I didn't ask for them either because, the only thing was I knew that was a barrier that was put there. And so I didn't really care about the scores. I once they didn't raise that again and use that against me, I figured they were pretty good. The next hurdle was that they had to get the approval of the Board of Regents. So the director of admissions went to Atlanta to meet with the chancellor and the rest of the folk up there who could make that decision. And in a history of Armstrong, she's quoted in there as saying how negative some of the regents were, and one of them just flatly told her, just deny me admission, and they would back me up. But then, for some reason, the faculty at Armstrong, at least the leadership of the faculty at Armstrong, said in a discussion that they had to have that it would be okay because other institutions in the university system were already desegregating. Hamilton Holmes and Charlene Hunter, the two graduates from the University of Georgia, were on the campus then and getting ready to graduate. So then on a Sunday, on June the 9th, I got a call to come to the campus, which was then located on Bull and Gaston Street. So I trekked on over there, and they told me that they were going to admit me, but they wanted me to register then and there, select the classes I wanted, and I would not have to come to registration on that Tuesday, which was the formal registration day. Just come on the classes on Wednesday, the 12th. So I filled out the forms and everything. And then there was a press conference held that Monday. The announcement was made. On Tuesday, the campus was cordoned off with barricades. A fire truck was parked in front of the administration building. There were state troopers, county police, and city police there. The only people who could come past the barricades were students who were coming to class or residents who lived in that area around Monterey Square. So Mr. Law arranged for a cab to pick me up because I had night classes. I had a class at 6 o'clock to start the day. And so they picked me up about 5:30 at my house on Rockefeller Street, which is a little trek from there to the school. And they brought me there every night for the first week. And then after that, I had to walk to school because my family didn't have a car. I didn't have a car. So that is the way the first week started.
Okay, so sitting in class. Once you got to school,
Mm-hmm.
walk through the doors.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me the feeling, some of the things that were said. What happened?
On that Tuesday, the president held an assembly for students, and I didn't know about this assembly, so I didn't go. But it is reported that the president told the students that if any of them caused any trouble by forming a group or harassing me individually, that they would be suspended from school. So when I got there, uh, I received what I describe as the invisible man treatment. Ralph Ellison wrote a classic book entitled Invisible Man, where he talks about how blacks are not seen in this society in many instances. And if you have seen The Butler, you can see, and also the help, where in many instances whites feel that we aren't present when we are present, and they can just ignore us and go on about their business as if we are not there. So with that in mind, I had a strategy which I used at Armstrong, and then when I went to the University of Georgia, I used it again, and that was in that first week of classes to go early to class, sit in the seat you want, and then as the students come in, they have to choose other seats around you. That way, you stake your ground, and you don't have to crawl across them or step on their feet to get past, to give them any reason to cause any kind of commotion. So that's what I did, and it is usual, not in just that situation, but it is usual that after the first couple of days, students generally stay in the seats that they start out with for the rest of the term.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. So I had my seat every day. And if I were a little late and some of them had gotten in there a little earlier, because I had staked my claim on that seat, they just sort of left it alone. That was my seat. So that went on for the first 2 quarters. We were on a quarter system then. The term was 10 weeks long.
Mm-hmm.
So we were halfway through probably the second quarter in the fall when the ice started melting a little bit, and there was a group on campus called Students for a Democratic Society.
Mm-hmm.
They were affiliated with a white radical group in the country made up of college students, and they wanted to make a statement about themselves and their purpose. And so some of the boys started, talking to me, and we just started chatting, and so then I became more visible in terms of interaction.
Okay. So normally in this day and age, when you say radical,
Mm-hmm.
you think bad, but at that time, radical meant that they were pro-black in essence. So the fact that they would come up, you as white individuals, have a conversation with you, talk to you, accept you, made them radical.
That is exactly right, because the ones who resented me being there, made it their uh, goal to continue to act as if I were not there. And this group made it their goal to reach out to me and to establish themselves in terms of uh, confronting the system, so to speak.
Now, years later, what I bet they always say, watch the bridges you burn. You don't know what you're gonna have to cross again. Years later, you become the mayor of the city of Savannah. Did you ever cross paths with anyone that you attended Armstrong with at the time as mayor of Savannah?
Yeah, I crossed paths with several of them, and a few of them reminded me that they were there when I was there. Because over the years, if you don't interact with people all the time, and I wasn't paying much attention to them anyway, there were some that I knew who had gone on to Georgia at the same time that I went, and there are some that stayed at Armstrong because in 1964, I believe, Armstrong became a four-year institution. So some of them who were freshmen there when I was a sophomore there stayed on and got their baccalaureate degrees. But yeah, I've run across several of them through the years, and now it's a whole different story.
Now everybody was your friend, huh?
Oh yeah, yeah. When you become the mayor, most people want to be your friend.
Let's talk about on my show. Uh, it's a hip hop show,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the things used in hip hop nowadays. One of the most hot button topics is the use of the N word, the word
Mm-hmm.
nigga.
Mm-hmm.
And in a previous conversation that we had earlier in the week, you said that nigga has been a hurtful word in your experience and used against you
Mm-hmm.
in a way that you'll never forget, you'll never forgive.
Mm-hmm. It is, and young people without historical knowledge doesn't understand how negative that word has been in our experience. I was born in 1942 and grew up during the Jim Crow era.
Mm.
And there were whites who felt very empowered to refer to black people as niggers, as coons, as all kinds of derogatory things. And I will never forget my grandmother, who my grandfather and my grandmother raised me, and we had these white insurance collectors in the day, as they say. Black people had life insurance policies that they took out, and either weekly or monthly, these white insurance men would come around in the community to collect their premiums. And I can remember them calling my grandmother, who was old enough to be their mother, by her first name, and calling my grandfather, by his first name. And then I would hear going down the street, white people refer to men that were much older than them as boy and uncle and all kinds of things that you knew were disrespectful, but in that day and time, you had to be very careful about how you responded to that kind of stuff. But yeah, I like to say, I grew up in Jim Crow. I helped to bring it down, and I benefited from that struggle. And now I'm trying to pass the torch on to a new generation who can continue to fight. But that word nigger is dynamite. I don't want any white person under any circumstances calling me a nigger. I use it to describe what I was called, and I don't play that game about the N word, because if I say I was called the N word, everybody knows what the N word is.
Mm-hmm.
So why not just go on and be upfront and honest and use the word?
Go ahead and
Now,
say it.
yeah, go on and say it. Now, I have problems when we are referring to each other, as niggers. And I know that we use it both in the positive and the negative, because we can say, you are my nigger,
Mm-hmm.
and say it in an endearing tone. and everybody knows that I'm trying to be positive about it. That you know, you're my friend. You know, my tight, as we used to say. Then, in a negative tone, I can say, nigga, I'm going to kick your you know what. Then the fight is on then, see, because I'm disrespecting you now.
Right.
So we use it that way. And some African Americans, some black people have claimed the right to use it. I would say that we ought to be very circumspect in the way we use it, because if we use it too loosely, then there are whites who are going to feel empowered to use it too, especially those whites who are supposed to have black friends, and they're going to be so friendly until in a conversation where blacks are talking about themselves and referring to each other as niggas, then they going to feel, empowered. No, don't do that. You're not going to ever be that close to me that you're going to be able to call me a nigga in an endearing way. Now, when you get mad, then I expect you to do that, because that's the way it's done.
Yeah. You a lot of truth is spoken in anger.
Yes, sir.
So you're around young people all the time. You know, you come to Savannah State campus every day, and I'm sure you hear the word thrown around by
Oh
young people.
yeah.
You have a lot of experience with today's young people. The fight that you fought, amongst others, W.W. Law, our current mayor, Edna Jackson, the fight that y'all brought to society and the world at the time, do you think this generation's version, the youth of today, the African American youth of today, have what it takes to brought the kind of fire and energy that y'all brought to any cause, to anything? Do you see that in them? Because a lot of the conversation I hear about today's youth is that self-serving. They don't care about nothing. They got the slogan, F you, pay me. If it's not about money, I don't want to hear it. It's a lot. It's all about me. You look at MTV, you look at BET, you see Cribs, and you see not only do you see Cribs, you see a lot of destructive things, Desperate Housewives and hip hop wives and all kind of NBA wives, all kind of just craziness. Do you see with the youth taking in all of that, they have the energy and the power to pick up a fight and do the type of things y'all did in the civil rights movement?
I think it's there, but I think over the years, blacks in general have succumbed to a materialistic attitude, and their value of themselves, the value that they see in the community, are all around acquiring things. The right Jordans, the right kind of baggy pants, the right kind of baggy shirt. The girls with all their midriff out, no matter how big they are, showing almost everything. Skirts so short that you can almost see their panties. We've come to a place where we need to say, time out. Let's take a look in the mirror. And who's that? Michael Jackson said, "Look, what is it? I can't remember. But Michael Jackson,
the man in the mirror.
The man in the mirror, and we need to say the woman in the mirror. And is that the image? Is that the image you want to project to the world? And we need a timeout on that one. Now, in terms of rallying to a cause, I have seen blacks really rally to causes, young blacks. When those young men were in trouble down in, I guess it was Mississippi or Louisiana. Was it Louisiana? You know who I'm talking about.
Gina 6.
Yeah, the Gina 6. Blacks from all across the country, young blacks, rallied and went down there and those who couldn't make that trip did things on their campuses to show their solidarity. In the Trayvon Martin uh, situation, I've seen more hoodies than I've ever seen in my lifetime as a symbolic statement in solidarity with that family and with what happened to Trayvon. So if the issue is right and it hits the right nerve, young people will rally. But the drive to have that McMansion, to have 5 cars and you can only drive one at a time, and they're not putting money in the bank. They're not. They're really not looking down the road. It's conspicuous consumption. That's what we call it in the social sciences. So they're caught up in conspicuous consumption. I build a big house. You got to build one bigger, and then the madness, just has a ripple effect. So, like most things, there is a positive side to what's happening in our community, and there's a negative side. I'm truly still very optimistic about this generation because I believe that there will come a set of circumstances that will light the fire, and once that fire is lit, then you don't ever put that out in your whole lifetime. That's what happened to us in the 60s, and we're still struggling, those of us who are still healthy and have our right minds, and the same thing will happen to these young people.
So is that a prediction that a storm is coming?
Oh, absolutely. You can see the fact that the white male power structure has recognized that their days rapidly coming to an end. By the middle of this century, they'll be a minority in the United States. And power concedes nothing without demand. And the power structure always struggles against losing power. That's a zero-sum game.
Mm-hmm.
They understand that. And they are now, and especially since Barack Obama was elected our president, they are in a deep funk. I'm telling you, these folk, if you look at television and the news coverage of Congress and what those folk are doing, you look at the state legislatures across the country, they have lost it. And I like to say that they're experiencing, just a psychological breakdown, because most of them never thought a black man would be the president and live in the White House. That's irony in itself, a black man in the White House. And then to see that the brown population is going to be the largest population in the country by the middle of the century, and they will be relegated to a minority status. They understand what they've done to minorities over time. And I think they are afraid that the new majority might repress them like they have repressed black folk. And it's an interesting time to be observing white folks.
You see a lot in the numbers in this past election. White women voted for Barack Obama, in opposed to the majority of white males. Why do you think white women are siding with the side of the minorities? And I mean, in essence, they are a minority themselves.
They're treated like a minority. If you watched last year and on into this year, the statements by white legislators, male white legislators, they have been very disrespectful to women, period. And white women have been struggling for equal rights for a long time. You have to remember, I don't remember the exact date, but it was around 1920 before women got the right to vote. Black men had the right to vote before white women had the right to vote because women couldn't vote. So Then you had, as a result of the civil rights movement, the women's liberation movement. They saw what blacks had done working for equality, and they knew, and they know now, that they are discriminated against. That's what the Lilly Ledbetter bill was all about, talking about equal pay for equal work. They were working in jobs that had the same title as men, yet they were being paid less than men. So they realized that they were being treated like a minority, and they made a statement, a very strong statement, in 2 presidential elections, that they just simply are not going to be oppressed as they had been in the past by white men. So there was a sense of solidarity there.
You grew up in the city of Savannah,
Mm-hmm.
a city that you've admitted called you a nigga,
Mm-hmm.
that 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 treated you unfairly,
Mm-hmm.
that frustrated you, that did a number of things that none of us, especially me. I know I grew up in a different time. I couldn't see ever letting people treat me the way you described you've been treated. What made you want to run for mayor? What brought back the love for Savannah enough to make you want to run for mayor and lead this city into a better direction?
Well, I had been a leader since my boyhood. I was a Boy Scout, and I emerged as a leader in the Boy Scouts. I played in the high school band. I emerged as the president of the band my senior year. Throughout my life, I have assumed leadership positions because I had the personality characteristics of speaking out, and when I saw what I thought was wrong, I spoke out against it, and that gained some respect.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 1983, I ran for city council because the city council was made up of a mayor and a hand-picked group of aldermen. And in 83, Floyd Adams, who became the first black mayor, Robbie Robertson, who was killed by a mail bomb, and I got together and said, we're going to challenge this status quo.
Mm.
And so we ran against blacks who had been there and we felt weren't really advocating for the black community. And we won. All 3 of us won. We ran again for re-election in 86 and won. During that time, it became evident that the demographics of Savannah were changing.
Mm-hmm.
When I grew up, the ratio was probably, or the population percentage was more like 60-40 whites to blacks. But over the years, when the suburban movement started, whites started moving out of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the previously white neighborhoods flipped and became black neighborhoods. Because once you get a certain number, and the magic number is about 25% of the neighborhood being black, the whites run. White flight, we called it. So the demographics said that in the future, in the not too distant future, a black person could run for mayor and be elected if they held the black community together and got 90% of the black vote. And if they got 15 to 20% of the white vote, they could win. So as that time came along, I left the council in 88, and it just wasn't time then. But between 88 and 96, Floyd Adams stayed on the council. I left in 88. Robert was killed in 89. Floyd stayed all of that time until he was elected mayor in 96. When 96 came around and we saw the demographics and the opportunity, we had a discussion in the community about who was going to run. Floyd was determined to run. He was going to run come hell or high water.
Mm.
And I knew that. So rather than get into a primary and have us split the vote and none of us win,
Mm-hmm.
I decided that since we had term limits of 2 terms, 8 years, I'd just wait and support him, help him get elected, and then when he can't run anymore, then it would be my turn. And that was communicated to the community. So when 2003 came around, everybody knew the deal and they knew what was going down. And I announced, and no other black announced to run against me. And there were 5 whites in that primary.
Mm-hmm.
There was a runoff because nobody got 51%. And it came down to Pete Lakakis, who was a city alderman at large, and me.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, I was elected by 51%. Then, ironically, when I ran for re-election in 2007, Floyd ran against me. And he was soundly defeated along with the other 4 or 5 because in my re-election campaign, I got 70% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the story. Now, why I did it is because I had already accumulated experience as an alderman. I knew the city. I knew how the city government worked. And I felt that I could provide some leadership and direction that would help the black community out. And I put myself in that position, and I did the best I could. Most people say I did a good job. History will be the judge of that probably about 10 years from now. So, you have to look back. Sometimes the heat of the moment distorts the reality.
Right.
But I'm comfortable that my place as a good mayor is secure in Savannah.
Off the air, we had a conversation earlier where we spoke about a book that you were working on.
Mm-hmm.
You care to talk on that on there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
the thing that caught me was the title of the book.
Yeah.
From Nigger to Mayor.
Right. That's the book is about my journey, and the title From Nigger to Mr. Mayor I'm chronicling that journey, where as a young boy in the streets of Savannah, you were just routinely called nigger by young people riding around in cars, or if you were walking, say, across Forsyth Park, or if you dared to go to Daffin Park, areas where you were not supposed to be, you were routinely called nigger. If you were walking through a white neighborhood, somebody would holler, "Nigger, what you doing over here?" Because we were living in basically segregated neighborhoods. So I grew up with all of that. When I went to the University of Georgia and I was walking to class, because I lived off campus, people would ride by and just call you a nigger or coon, try to throw stuff out on you. So I lived through that, and so I'm not running away from that. The irony in the title is that after I became mayor, when people, black and white, wanted something from the mayor, they would make an appointment and they would come to the mayor's office, and I would greet them, and they would say, "Good morning, Mr. Mayor," "Good morning," or "Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, how you doing?" Then they would tell you what they wanted, and we'd have that discussion. And then if they got what they wanted when they left, you could tell that they were happy, and they always would leave saying, "Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor."
Mm-hmm.
But if they didn't get what they want, you could see it on their faces. And in my mind, I know once they got out of my office, I guess they would say, well, I want, who does that nigga think he is, or something. But I would revert back to nigga. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Early in my first term in 2004, there were 2 portraits of Confederate soldiers, huge portraits of Confederate soldiers in the city council chambers. And the council sat in a position where you were looking at those portraits. And I said that I am not going to spend 4 years looking at these Confederates, looking at me. And so I got with the city manager, and I said, this is an insult to us, to the whole city, black and white, to have these Confederates in the chamber, which is supposed to be where we take care of the people's business. And so we had those removed and taken to the Georgia Historical Museum down at the Visitors Center.
And the Confederates that you talk about were 2 generals.
There was Wheaton and Lee.
Wheaton, who the street today.
That's right. After. That's exactly right. And General Robert E. Lee, who led the Confederate Army. They were in their uniforms in these big portraits in the chambers. Now, they should have been removed from there for a long time because that's an insult to black people. Those people fought to keep us in slavery. They can play that game about they were fighting for states' rights and all that stuff. No, they were fighting to perpetuate slavery, which gave them the economic wherewithal to be rich and to have these big plantations and these big mansions in the city of Savannah. Those things were the result of our free labor from 1619 until the end of slavery, and even beyond because of the sharecropping system and all of that. But anyway, that's another story. But we had those removed, and in one of these web publications from one of these southern heritage groups, I was called a nigger mayor. And we have the documentation that's the way that they referred to me for having the audacity to remove those portraits from City Hall. So my life has been one of where I've lived with that no matter what position that I had, how high or how low, in the eyes of some people, I'm still a nigger. And I'm clear about that.
That don't irritate you though, Liz? Like,
no, well,
you done fought all the battles you done fought.
Yeah.
You are the mayor.
Yeah.
And you still a nigga.
Well, my grandparents used to tell me it's not what you are called, but what you answer to. Mm-hmm. So in the day, we were conditioned psychologically to know that we were as good as anybody else, and we were taught this little thing about sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. We had a lot of psychological mechanisms to help us cope. Now, if you know you are not a nigger in the way they mean it, then they're ignorant for calling you that. Mm-hmm. When you react to that, that is giving them power over you. And there are those of us who grew up with the understanding that we weren't going to give them that power over us. We were going to work to have the power. For example, I had the power to grant their wish or not grant their wish. They could call me anything they want. That didn't make me give them what they wanted because I had the power. And I exercised that power as best I could. When we had, in my last year, the struggle over who was going to be the next city manager once the white male city manager resigned, mm-hmm. I made it very clear that I wanted a city manager who was, number one, qualified, and number two, who looked like me. Well, the qualified part got lost in the media, but the who looked like me said that I was practicing reverse racism,
Right.
you see, because I wanted somebody to look like me. And I did not back down from it. And they railed about it in the paper and on especially on the internet.
I remember.
Yeah. So, you got to just like I stood by myself to go to Armstrong, when you believe in something, you got to stand. And because we had a majority of blacks on the city council, when it was time to vote, we had a 5-4 vote. All whites voted against the black woman. All blacks voted for her. And we broke 2 glass ceilings with that one person, the first black and the first female city manager. Unfortunately, she did not work out and was forced to resign. But fortunately, there was somebody in the wings, a black woman, who could come in and take that position. So I feel real good about that. That's one of my proudest moments, man.
I remember that battle.
Yes, sir.
I was working for a local media outlet.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that one from the wing.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about it is that I was saying that, first of all, this person must be qualified. Because I wasn't going to hire or help to hire an unqualified person. This person who we hired had been acting city manager for a year and had proven that she was qualified for the job.
And if I wasn't mistaken, the outgoing city manager at the time, she worked with him.
He brought her here from North Carolina.
Okay.
He hired her. So he had confidence in her ability to fulfill the duties of assistant city manager. And when he left, we elevated her to the acting position to really sort of give her a test. And as far as the 5 of us were concerned, and when you look at the newspaper accounts and other kinds of things, during that period, she got good praise for her work. But then when it came time for the permanent stuff, because in Savannah, the city manager is the most powerful man in the city.
Right.
More power than the mayor has, because the mayor doesn't hire or fire anybody. The council with the mayor hires the city attorney, the city manager, and the city clerk. That's all. All the rest of the hiring is done by the city manager. So we do the policy work in setting up the policies and giving directives to the city manager. But the chief executive officer of the city is the city manager, which is tremendous power. You got 2,500 employees. You got over a $200 million budget every year. That's a lot of power. And now we've got Stephanie Cutter in that position, and I'm very proud that she's there. She's doing a good job, and I'm going to take credit for helping to make that happen.
Ms. Cutter does a very good job.
Yeah, very good.
When you were mayor, you displayed a level of fearlessness. You were fair. Don't get me wrong. You were fair.
I tried to be.
And you shot things straight. You always spoke your mind. And you didn't care how people took it. You said what you thought was right, what you thought was fair. Where did that fearlessness? You never played the game of politics, what I call it.
Right.
You
right.
never you always, the only line that you cared to walk, the only line that you cared to toe was your own.
Right.
Where did that come from?
That's a good question. It has something to do with my personality and my personal philosophy. I'm an introvert. Years and years ago, I took the Myers-Briggs test, which is a personality inventory. And I'm an introvert, so I uh, understand the need to socialize and to do certain kinds of extroverted things. But I don't mind being by myself. As a matter of fact, I like being by myself a lot. Um, so to take positions that I felt were right, I didn't mind if I were the only one, or as I said very early, I learned that lesson with the Armstrong situation. Or if there's a whole city that wants it, then we go. But if I need to stand alone, I'll stand alone. I never saw myself in the stereotypical role of a politician. The stereotypical role of a politician is somebody that's out there glad handing, looking for an opportunity to get the next office hire, to get some kind of financial benefit from being in office, or all of those kind of things that people look at in the stereotypical definition of a politician. I totally rejected that. I was there to try to advance an agenda. And I put that agenda out during the first campaign because it was my position that this is what I'm going to try to do if you give me the opportunity to be mayor. If you don't agree with this agenda, then you vote for somebody else because this is what I'm going to be working on. Mm-hmm. The other thing is I was financially independent. I wasn't looking for a job. As a matter of fact, I retired from Savannah State for the purpose of running for mayor. And I had my pension. So I didn't need a job. Now, some people in politics look at that as a job. Mm-hmm. So I didn't need that. And I was never tempted, to think of it that way. I wanted to be a servant leader, to serve the needs of the people through a leadership position. And so I took in my first inaugural address, I said that we were going to face the twin evils of poverty and racism. Mm-hmm. And so throughout my administration, I tried to find ways to fight those two evils. In some of my initiatives, I was successful. In some, I wasn't. But that was my marching order, to go into this position, to use the bully pulpit of that position to advance the cause. And see, when you talk about poverty, you're talking about helping black people and brown people and white people. But the face of poverty is always black. Mm-hmm. The stereotype, when somebody says people in poverty, the image that pops into most people's mind is a black person. And so you can't work to end poverty or reduce poverty without helping black people because they're disproportionately poor. When you talk about racism, automatically you know who you're talking about, mm-hmm. because racism is an impediment to the progress of black people. So I don't have to run around with my fist in the air shouting and raising a lot of noise. It's in the policies and in the practices and in the laws that you can make changes in those positions. And I knew that, and that was my motivation for wanting to be mayor.
Even in your first term, when you knew you had a second term to go for, you made decisions in a manner that you cared less about the vote for re-election. Which is very untypical, even of somebody that doesn't qualify them as a politician. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You still had an agenda, mm-hmm. and you wanted to get certain things done in that agenda,
Mm-hmm.
and you knew you needed 2 terms to do that.
That's correct.
But you still acted in a way where I don't care about your vote. Not that you don't care about the vote. I guess that's a wrong way of putting it.
Yeah.
But you acted in a way that you would not let that dictate your decisions or what you were going to do or how you were going to act in a way that you would do what was right.
I felt that that first 4 years had been a good 4 years, and we had a record to run on. We could list the accomplishments, which we did. And it was my opinion, as you describe it, that my life would not end if I were not reelected. And I felt that if the people of Savannah didn't think that that record was good enough to deserve a second term, then they need to get somebody else. Because I was going to stay. I ran the first time with the idea of doing the 8 years, and my agenda wasn't going to change. So if the record of that first term wasn't good enough, then they would have elected one of those other 5 people who ran. But it was good enough, and as I said, with all of them in the race, I got 70% of the vote. So black people and a majority of the whites felt that I had done a good enough job to deserve a second term.
Floyd Adams,
Mm-hmm.
you all went into city government together.
Mm-hmm.
You supported him through 2 terms.
Mm-hmm.
When you ran for your second term and he ran against you,
Mm-hmm.
did you all have a conversation about what was there? Hey, what you doing? Was it one of those moments between y'all?
No, because first of all, it was my hope from the very beginning that we might be able to do what Maynard Jackson pulled off in Atlanta. Maynard Jackson had his 2 terms and left just because they have term limits too.
Mm-hmm.
Andy Young replaced him because you have to sit out a term if you want. But Andy came in and served his term, and then Maynard came back after Andy couldn't run again and was elected again. I felt that if Floyd really wanted to be mayor again, that he would use that strategy. But he was too impatient, or he didn't respect me enough to wait, or whatever. But he ran against me and he lost. Then, all during the 8 years, we were grooming Edna Jackson, to be my successor.
Mm-hmm.
He ran against Edna when Edna ran to replace me.
Mm-hmm.
So he has lost quite a bit of respect in the black community, because the black community gave him an opportunity to serve on the school board and elected him to the school board. And halfway through that term, if it was halfway through that term, he resigned to run for mayor. So there are a lot of people that are still angry with him because, he was just using various political offices to try to get back into something that he wanted to do. It appears, that he really didn't want to be on the school board. He just wanted to be elected to something.
Right.
And the people gave him that chance. And he left them. Now we have a faculty member, Dr. Dion Hoskins, who is representing that district, and I'm very happy about her representation because she's on it.
Dr. Hoskins.
Yeah, she is on it. So I don't know what Mr. Adams' future is in the past, but there's a lot of coolness between us, and I'm going to always respect him. but I certainly didn't like what he tried to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we close, share. Most of my listening audience are young.
Mm-hmm.
You know, target range between 18 and 35.
Mm-hmm.
Share your vision, your goal for the future of not only African Americans, but the city and race relations as a whole.
When I was in elementary school, they taught us about the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. I believed that the things those documents said in the creation of the United States, where they say that everybody is equal and they are to be protected by the law and all of those things, that is a wonderful idea and concept. And it's been used around the world, but it is an ideal type. You know, in the social sciences, we talk about an ideal type where something, you give the perfect description of something.
Mm-hmm.
So when these people talk about democracy, they're trying to export democracy all over the world. But they have not practiced true democracy in the United States from the very beginning. Concerning black people, in the Constitution, we were 3/5 of a person. They didn't give women the right to vote. So there were certain groups, and in the beginning, you had to be a property owner to vote. So even in the beginning of this ideal thing that they were creating, there were a lot of flaws. But I believe, just like King says in his speeches, not just one speech, but in his speeches, that one day this nation will live up to what it said it wanted to be. Now, if it's not, then you as a citizen have a right and an obligation to try to make it what it should be. And that's what the struggle has been. Black people have been the best conscience of this country from day one, because we have never accepted our second-class citizenship, and we have never accepted the discriminatory practices that have been carried out against us. And we have inspired other people, like the women's movement, the gay movement, the anti-war movement, what is happening on the that Wall Street kind of thing. Mm-hmm. All of the social movements in the United States have been sort of patterned after our struggle. So I want young people to learn that history, to understand that we are not in a post-racial society, that the rights and privileges that were guaranteed by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are still unmet for everybody, and that they need to be concerned, because if not, the powers that be will slowly erode those rights, just like they're trying to mess with our voting rights right now. Mm-hmm. And if we sit down and let that happen, then they'll find something else to take back, So the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And so the young people now have to take up the next watch, so to speak, and be careful, because those oppressive powers are not going to give up very easily. And the more they're threatened, the more dangerous they're going to become. It's like an animal that's caged.
Dr. Johnson, I want to thank you. You spent just about an hour talking to me, the city as a whole, and my listening audience. And I've hyped this interview up all week. via social media, Facebook, whatever avenue I had. I hyped it up because I feel like it's one of the most important interviews that I would do, and that I've done. I've been doing radio for 12 years and been in TV for 10, and I feel like this is one of the most important things that I've done. And as a young African American male, one that grew up in the city of Savannah, I salute you and I thank you for everything that you've done for us.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to have you say that, and I appreciate this opportunity to share not only with you but your listening audience.
Yes, sir. I want you guys to keep it locked. WHCJ 90.3 FM.